As you gain more experience in Excel and start performing different calculations, you'll notice that sometimes your results will show an error as opposed to the results you expected. On some occasions, you might be able to correct the inputs of your calculations directly, but what if you can't do it? If that's the case, the best way to keep consistency in your formulas is by using the function IFERROR. So let's check how we can do it. In this first example, we need to identify the total variable cost incurred by each of these companies from A to P. For each business, we have the volume sold of a specific product as well as the production and delivery costs. Total variable costs for this company A, for example, should be equal to the volume sold from cell C5 times the sum of production and delivery costs. So here you need to press the star key to indicate you want to perform a multiplication, and in brackets make the sum of the cells D5 and E5. The total cost per product is equal to $90 per unit, and this combined cost multiplied by the volume sold of 10,000 units will produce a total variable cost of $900,000. So far, this formula seems to work fine. However, let's expand this formula to all companies in this list and check what happens. We can then see these 4 error alerts will be displayed in the cells. This error is known as error in value because one of the parameters used in this multiplication is actually not a value. We can clearly identify this happens to the companies E, I, L, and N. As there is no information related to delivery costs for these companies, this non-applicable notation was inserted in the cells. To correct this issue, we need to have an adapted formula for each of these companies which have this error alert. This adapted formula should then be limited to the variables volume sold times production cost only. However, you don't want to adapt your calculations anytime you identify an error in the original formula, especially if your dataset is large and dynamic. This would be too time-consuming and, of course, subject to more errors. So the best solution in this case is to use the function IFERROR. So press F2 in the cell F5 and just after the equal sign type the word if. The function IFERROR is in the second position of this list, so highlight that option and press tab to select it. This function requires 2 arguments, value and value IFERROR. The argument value is basically the result of the main formula you are trying to insert, which is this one already in place. Now press comma to skip to the next argument, which is the value IFERROR. Here you basically need to disclose what alternative formula you should have anytime there is an error in this first formula. As we saw, if an error exists which is caused by the misinformation related to delivery cost, you basically need to have the variable volume sold multiplied by the variable production costs. In other words, you need to have cell C5 multiplied by the cell D5 only. You can then close brackets, press Ctrl Enter and expand this formula down, and all error alerts will then disappear. If you then copy this notation non-applicable from this cell and paste it in this cell E5, for example, you can check the result will be automatically adapted. Instead of showing an error alert, this time the result of this function will basically decrease from $900,000 to $850,000, as this time there is no delivery cost displayed in the cell E5. If you press F2 here, you can then see what is driving the result this time is the argument value IFERROR, as the first argument value is the one producing an error. Now a bonus tip on this example 1. A clever way of auditing combined formulas like this one is to select a portion of the formula and then either hit the key F9 in your keyboard or this Calculate Now button available in the formula menu. So in this case, we can see the first argument is indeed returning an error, and therefore the second argument, which is showing the result $850,000, will prevail. If you then get this delivery cost for company A back to $5 per unit, and again use the Calculate Now procedure for these 2 arguments, You can see that you now have two results correctly showing up. But in this case, the main value, which is located in this first argument, will prevail, as there is no error here this time. In this second example, we need to calculate the profit margin for each business. This is a metric which basically shows what portion of the revenues has been successfully transformed into a profit, which is done with a simple division. So for company A, we need cell J5, which represents the profit amount, divided by cell I5, which represents the sales amount. So company A has reported a 20% profit margin. If we copy this formula to the cell below, we can see company B has reported a 19% profit margin. However, if I try to expand this formula to all companies listed here, then these three error alerts will be displayed in this column K. These first two errors are classified as error in value. This is because, again, we have this notation non-applicable in these two cells. As this is a text and not a value itself, this error will pop up. This third error is called divide by zero error. It shows up because it's impossible to divide any number by zero. Regardless of the type of error we find, we need an alternative result to show up here, so let's again use the function IFERROR. So let's first insert that function in the cell K5 using the same commands we explained in the example 1. The first argument value is represented by this formula, so press comma to skip to the next argument, which is the value that should be returned in case you get an error in this division. For now, let's assume we want the value 0 to be returned here, so type that number, close brackets, press Ctrl-Enter and expand this formula down. Now any error alert you had initially will be replaced by the number 0. Now a bonus tip in this example 2. You should always be careful if the value 0 is the correct result you should have in your function IFERROR. For example, let's imagine I ask you to show me through a function the minimal profit margin displayed in this table. You could then use the statistical function minimum to perform this task, where the argument is this range K5 to K20. If you then close brackets and press Enter, you then see that the value 0% is the result of this function. However, we know this is actually the result of an error in the calculation of the profit margins for the companies F, J, and M. Therefore, the value 0 in the function IFERROR should be replaced by a text and not a value. Let's, for example, press F2 in the cell K5, replace the second argument by quotation marks, which indicates a blank space in Excel, and send this formula down. Now, no value will be returned for those three companies, and the function minimum here now returns you the valid result of 12%, which is related to this company I. You can also change this argument value IFERROR by another non-applicable notation and send this formula down. By doing this, your table will look more elegant, but the correct result for the minimum margin will still be displayed here. So just to recap, try to investigate the issue of the errors you are facing first. If you can fix the issue at the source, like having the correct and complete inputs in place, that's better. However, sometimes it may not be possible. The function IFERROR will then help you, as you can either have an alternative result or an adapted formula to deal with the error. If this video was useful to you, please share it to your family and friends, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up to help the channel. Also, if you want to hear from me anytime I publish a new video like this, click on subscribe. All the best and see you in the next video.